Kia ora, welcome to Oasis Scents. Today I'm showing you how I go from that to this using DIY soap scrapers. Welcome! Today I am showing you how I make my DIY scrape soaps. Scrape soaps? What do you call it? Sculpted soaps. Gosh, I'm starting off great. This is actually my second time trying to record this voiceover because interruptions. But I will start off with my picture and I will label each number, each section of the picture different numbers to correspond to my soap scrapers. As this is a multi-layered soap, I'm going to need more than one scraper. If you're just doing one thing, you don't need to do this. You just need to make your scraper. I will then measure the mold and draw out some squares, good old handy squares. They'll be the same width and depth, as the mold. This wasn't the best ruler for this, but it worked out well in the end. I also use my scissors as a ruler, so that's great. Good job me. And then I will, draw the different squares. I'll make sure I have enough for every soap scraper that I need. For this one in particular, I started with 4, but I actually only ever needed 3 because I didn't really think it through. In particular, something that I would like to mention is if this one in particular, if you can see on my design there, I have one that is a side only. That was my number 3 scraper, and it was originally meant to be a tree trunk. It turned into sort of like a cliff side. But something that's important to note is if you're going to do something like that where it's not the bottom section, you need to make sure you cut out the negative and not cut out the positive, so what you're scraping out is the negative of that picture. Does that make sense? I don't know if it does, but hopefully it does. So this is me showing you how many I needed, and then I'm going to start by drawing my design on only one of my squares. See how I draw 4 squares? I only needed 3, but I'll draw it on my original one, so then I can make sure that I've got the design, and then I'll use that particular one to then trace my design onto the other soap scrapers. Once I then cut out my soap scraper, I will then make sure I cut out all the other ones, and then I'll get on to transferring my original design onto the other one. So I'll start by taking out one section, which will be the bottom section, and then tracing that onto the next section, and then I'll trace the next section over and over again until I've got the appropriate soap scrapers that I need. Hopefully it makes sense. I keep saying that. I'm so sorry. I'm not very good at these voiceovers. And then once I have done that, I'll also make sure I label every single one so I don't get confused, because I make these in a different room to where I soap. You're going to be transporting them. You don't want to use them in the wrong order, otherwise you've then mucked up your soap. So, that's important. I'll start off by, like I said, cutting out the bottom one. And this doesn't have to be perfect because honestly, cardboard is kind of thick. I'd love to work on a thinner material. I have in the past. I've used corflute. Well, not corflute, like the poster board or foam board. That worked out really well. I'd also recommend that as material. And yeah, so this is me labeling it, tracing it, you can see here, and then I will cut out that trace section. So that's my soap scraper number 1, and then I will use my original one there as the continuous tracing model, should I say, to make sure that things are staying uniform and the same every single time. So yeah, that is this section. Pretty straightforward, and then we'll get into the making of the soap and how I actually then do the scraping in particular. I will always make sure I work with a slightly thicker batter. Either that is through, first of all, I will always make sure I separate out the colours and not add fragrance to anything until I'm about to use that colour, which is what a lot of people do anyway as soap making. But in particular for this one, I will make sure I work with a thicker batter. That is either through letting it sit for a long time, working at slightly higher temperatures, or just using a fragrance that thickens up. And then once I've poured it in, I'll use the soap scraper to scrape the excess off. In this case, because I kind of wasn't very good with my totals, I didn't need to use another mold to just put extra soap into. I just put it back in there and then repositioned things. Normally I'm pretty good at this. This is the first time I soaped with this sort of mold for a while, so I was off my game. And then once I've done the first layer, I'll repeat for the second layer. You can see in this one too, I didn't actually put enough in for the second layer, so I had to go back and add a bit more and then go back and scrape some more. And then for the third one, I will show you that I actually do something else. So let's skip to that part quickly. Here is what it kind of looks like after I've done the scraping. It's a bit messy. You can wipe down the sides if you want, but I don't. Well, sometimes I do if I'm really messy, but if I'm not, I kind of leave it. So here on this one, because it was like a tree trunk / turned into cliffs, I decided to just put soap down one side, which is the right side of the mold. This is because I didn't want it to go on top of the other color. I did actually accidentally pour a little bit onto the wrong side. That's me being clumsy. It wasn't intentional. But yeah, if you're doing like a slightly sculpted soap where you want a tree trunk or something only on one side, definitely recommend pouring also at an angle. For this one I did pour at an angle, and then just scraping that side down, making sure soap only goes on one side, and cleaning up as you go because you want it to look as good as possible. This isn't my best soap, I'm gonna admit that right now, the one in this example video, but I only make this soap like once every so often, and I've been wanting to do how I do my sculpted soaps for a really long time, but this is the only one I've done, and it didn't turn out exactly how I wanted, but you get the idea, hopefully, on how I at least make soap scrapers, and then maybe someone else has a better video on how to actually do the soap scraping, but I'll throw up some examples at the end of how my good ones have turned out. I've also done like essentially polymer clay logs, which is a thing, but as soap instead, to show you. I'll show you that one as well. So here's what the soap looks like overall as the top, and here is what the inside looks like. You can see that I've got the two colors at the bottom kind of, and then my sculpted brown side didn't turn out exactly like the picture, but here are some examples of other ones I've done that did turn out like that. So thanks for watching.
My love language is your time and attention. Won't you give some of it to me?